I now invite the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance to make a statement. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honor to table, in both official languages, the 2023 Fall Economic Statement. Mr. Speaker, our government was elected on a promise to deliver for the middle class. And our economic plan is focused on building an economy that works for everyone, with good jobs that people can count on. Les grands investissements
Major
pour le transport en
investments
commun,
in public
les usines
transit,
de batteries
in
pour
EV
véhicules
battery
électriques
factories,
et les nouveaux
and in
projets
new energy
d'énergie
projects
ne sont pas juste
are not
des
just
dépenses
red
isolées
ink
dans notre
in our
énoncé
fiscal
économique.
statement.
Ce sont de vrais
They are
investissements
truly
sur des
investments,
décennies dans la
decade-long
croissance
investments
économique.
in the
Une
economic
croissance
growth,
qui va
which
créer
creates
des emplois
middle-class
dans la
jobs,
classe moyenne, augmenter
which
les
raises
revenus
incomes
et accroître
and
la
makes middle-class
prospérité
communities
des communautés de la classe
more
moyenne.
prosperous.
Like the Transcontinental Railway a century ago, these are foundational investments which only government can make. We believe in Canada, and we believe in the incredible possibility of Canada's future. And that is why we are making the investments that Canada needs to make that bright future a reality.
Bravo.
Affordable early learning and childcare is likewise an investment in our social infrastructure, and it is also transformative economic policy. It gives children the best possible start in life and saves middle-class families thousands of dollars a year, while also supporting record women's employment and thus helping to address the labor shortages which contributed to inflation. When I announced our plan to build a Canada-wide system of affordable early learning and childcare, some people were skeptical, and justifiably so. After all, it was a promise that had been made and broken for 5 decades. But today, just 2.5 years after we launched our plan, it is working. Childcare fees are down by at least 50% across Canada. In 6 provinces and territories, we've already brought childcare costs down to just $10 a day. And we are on track to deliver outstanding, nurturing care for $10 a day everywhere in Canada by 2026. Et c'est les femmes
And
du
it
Québec
is women in Quebec
qui nous ont montré la voie à
who
suivre
led us the
en
way,
termes de
led the way in
services
terms
de
of
garde
affordable
à prix
childcare.
abordable. Notre plan soutient
Therefore,
donc la
our plan
création
supports the
de
creation
30 000
of
nouvelles
30,000
places
new
afin que les
spots
services de garde
to make
soient
childcare
encore
services
plus
more
accessibles
accessible
à travers la
across the
belle
province.
province. Enhancements to Canada's social safety net, ranging from the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, the Canada Pension Plan, are about driving down inequality raising incomes, and ensuring by design, not by trickle down, that everyone can truly share in our country's prosperity. With investments in our economy, our communities, and a new generation of middle-class careers, we have focused relentlessly on ensuring that government investments deliver real economic opportunities for all Canadians. And that, Mr. Speaker, is our economic plan. Pensons seulement à tout le chemin
Just
parcouru,
think of
Monsieur le
how far
Président.
we've come, Mr.
Tout de
Speaker.
suite après une décennie
after a
d'austérité
decade of
sous les
conservative
conservateurs,
austerity,
notre gouvernement a sorti
government
près de
has lifted nearly
2,3
2.3
millions de
million
Canadiennes
Canadians out
et de
of
Canadiens
poverty.
de la pauvreté. L'inflation
Inflation
descend
is coming
et
down,
les salaires augmentent.
and wages are going
Et
up.
les économistes du secteur privé
And private sector
prévoient maintenant
economists now
que le
expect
Canada
Canada
évitera
to avoid
la
the
récession
post-pandemic
post-pandémique que bien
that
des
many
gens
had
avaient
predicted.
prévu. And thanks to our economic plan, Canada is today a global investment destination of choice. In the
Yep.
In the first half of this year, Canada received the third most foreign direct investment of any country in the entire world.
Bravo! Bravo!
And that was more investment per capita than any of our G7 allies. More investment than the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, France, or Japan.
Wow.
And the IMF projects Canada to likewise see the strongest economic growth in the G7 next year.
Wow.
What does all of this mean for people, Mr. Speaker? What this means is that our economy is creating great jobs for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And compared to before the pandemic, I am so glad to be able to say that over 1 million more Canadians are employed today. We all have more work to do, Mr. Speaker, but our economic plan is working. Ceci étant dit, je sais que beaucoup
Now,
de
I don't
Canadiennes
want
et
to
de Canadiens
deny
vivent des moments
the
difficiles
difficult
ces
reality
jours-ci.
that many Canadians
Je
are facing
comprends
today.
parfaitement qu'après
I
3 années
absolutely
difficiles,
understand that after
après
3
une
difficult
pandémie,
years, after a
l'inflation
global
et
pandemic,
l'augmentation des taux
global
d'intérêt,
inflation,
les
and global
Canadiennes
interest
et les
rate
Canadiens
hikes,
sont fatigués,
Canadians are worn out,
frustrés
frustrated,
et sous pression.
and feeling the squeeze.
Aujourd'hui, les Canadiennes
What
et les
Canadians
Canadiens
deserve today
méritent que nous nous attassions
us
à
to
la
address
souffrance réelle que
the very real
beaucoup
pain
d'entre
that so
eux
many are feeling.
ressentent et que nous le faisions en proposant une vision de
With a
l'avenir
hopeful and
optimiste
achievable
et
vision
réaliste
for our
pour
country's
notre pays.
future.
C'est ma priorité.
That is my priority.
C'est la priorité de notre
That is our
gouvernement
government's
et
priority.
c'est la priorité
And that
de
is the
cet
priority
énoncé
of this
économique
fall
de l'OTAN.
economic statement.
The foundation of our fall economic statement is our responsible fiscal plan. In the face of global inflation, our government has reduced the deficit faster than any other country in the G7. And, And with inflation down from 8.1% last year to just 3.1%
Wow, that's
today.
something. That's something.
We are taking care not to feed inflation by carefully targeting new investments towards the priorities of Canadians today and towards the future growth that makes our finances sustainable. Canada maintains both the lowest deficit and the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the G7. And with a new reduction in public service spending, this fall economic statement builds on the $15 billion in refocus spending that I announced in the spring. We are ensuring that Canada's finances remain sustainable, because that's how we'll be able to continue investing in Canadians for years to come. Fondé sur notre plan budgétaire
upon our
responsable,
responsible fiscal
notre
plan,
énoncé économique de
Our fall
l'automne
economic
vise
statement
deux
has
objectifs.
two objectives.
Le premier consiste à continuer
first
de soutenir
is to
la
continue
classe
supporting
moyenne
the middle class
à un moment
at a
où
time
certains
when some
prix
prices
restent élevés
are still high,
et où, pour beaucoup de
and
gens,
for
le
many,
renouvellement
mortgage
de l'hypothèque
renewals
est imminent.
are looming.
Ainsi, nous apportons au droit de la concurrence au Canada
This is why
les
we are
modifications
making
les plus importantes de
sizable
notre
changes,
génération. Ce geste
generational
sans
changes to
précédent
competition law in
prévoit
Canada.
la
This
répression des
historic
prix
step
abusifs
includes
et
cracking
d'autres
down on
tactiques
predatory
utilisées
pricing
par les
and other
grandes
tactics
entreprises
that big
pour
corporations
augmenter
use
les
to
coûts
raise
qui
costs
doivent
for
payer
Canadians.
les Canadiennes et les Canadiens. Parler du droit de la concurrence peut
Talking
sembler
about
ésotérique.
competition law may
Mais
sound
ce n'est pas le cas.
esoteric, but it's
Il
not.
s'agit plutôt d'une nouvelle mesure
This is new,
importante et
significant,
concrète
concrete
qui va
action
contribuer
that
à la
will help
stabilisation
to
des prix
stabilize prices
et offrir plus
and
de choix
provide more
aux
choices
Canadiennes
for
et
Canadians.
aux Canadiens.
Tout à fait. Bravo.
Nous agissons contre les frais
We are cracking
indésirables
down
qui
on the
pèsent
junk fees
lourd
that
sur les
Canadians are
Canadiennes
saddled with
et les
every day.
Canadiens tous les jours.
Every
Et
day.
nous lançons une enquête
And
sur les
an
frais
investigation will soon be
d'itinérance qui
launched
font
into
grimper les
international
factures de
roaming
téléphone
charges
des Canadiennes
that drive
et
up
des Canadiens.
Canadians' phone
Nous
bills.
supprimons la TPS
We are
et la
lifting the
TVH
GST and
sur les
HST
services de
on counseling
psychothérapie
and
et du
psychotherapy
counseling
services
afin que les
so that
Canadiennes
Canadians
et les
can
Canadiens
receive the
puissent
support they
recevoir le soutien dont ils ont besoin. Nous étendons
We are
l'assurance emploi
extending
aux
employment
parents
insurance to
qui
parents who
adoptent un
adopt.
enfant et de nouveaux congés pour
And
les
we
travailleurs
are introducing a
et
new leave
travailleuses
for
sur
federally
réglementation
regulated
fédérale
workers
qui vivent une deuil
who are
à la
grieving
suite d'une fausse
from miscarriages.
parce que chaque
Because
famille,
every
peu
family,
importe sa composition,
no matter how it comes
devrait
together,
avoir le temps de
needs
tisser
time to
les liens.
bond.
Et chaque femme devrait
And
avoir
every
le temps
woman
de se remettre
should have
de la
time to
douleur
heal
ressentie
from
après
the
une
painful
fin
loss of
du
a pregnancy.
grossesse. And to protect Canadians who are struggling with their mortgage payments at a time of higher interest rates, today I am announcing the new Canadian Mortgage Charter. The Canadian Mortgage Charter details the tailored mortgage relief that Canadians need and can expect from their banks if they are in financial difficulty. Our goal is to help Canadians through an incredibly challenging time by making sure Canadians have the support they need to afford their mortgages and keep their homes when renewing at a time of higher interest rates. And we're committed to taking further action if necessary. Our second objective is equally urgent. For generations, Canada has been a country where if you worked hard, if you went to school, found a good job, and squirreled some money away, there would be a home that you could afford. For generations, that promise was kept. But today, for a generation that ranges from new high school graduates to couples in their 30s making six-figure salaries, that is a promise which is under threat. Keeping that promise demands a great national effort, and that is an effort that our government is stepping up to lead. building on the significant action we have already taken, including this fall alone, I am today announcing new measures through our economic plan to build thousands upon thousands upon thousands of new homes across the country and to build homes faster. We are unlocking billions of dollars in new financing, money that will go towards supporting the construction of new homes for Canadians. We are supporting nonprofit, co-op, and public housing providers. We will be helping to cut the red tape that prevents construction workers from moving across the country to build homes, and we will be bringing more of the skilled trades workers that our construction sector needs to Canada. We'll be cracking down on short-term rentals listed on sites like Airbnb and Vrbo, which are keeping far too many homes off the market in communities and cities right across the country. That's going to make a real difference to communities. And Mr. Speaker, that is just what we are doing today. We are also making it easier for more than 250,000 Canadians and counting to buy their first home with the new tax-free First Home Savings Account. The federal government owns more land than anyone else in Canada, and we're going to build more homes on it. We're lifting the GST on new rental construction to make it more affordable for builders to build so that they can build more homes faster. We're repairing and building hundreds of thousands of new homes, and we are financing the construction of tens of thousands more. We have banned foreign investment in Canadian housing, and we're ensuring that property flippers pay their fair share. We're making it more affordable for families to construct secondary suites. And we have signed agreements with cities across the country to slash the red tape, which is preventing homes from being built in the first place. And in exchange, we're providing them with new funding to build more than 100,000 new homes faster. Because our country needs more homes, and we need more of them, fast. Nous devons construire des logements
We must build
dans nos
homes
plus grandes villes
in our biggest
et dans
cities
nos plus
and our
petits
smallest
villages.
towns.
Nous devons construire des maisons
must build
familiales individuelles
detached family
et
homes
des logements
and secondary
secondaires.
suites.
Nous devons construire
We
des
must
logements
build
coopératifs
co-op housing
et des
and
appartements.
rental apartments.
Et nous devrons tous contribuer
And it
à
will
cet
take all
effort.
of us,
Le gouvernement
the federal
fédéral
government
et les
and
provinces,
the provinces,
les villes et les villages,
cities
le
and
secteur
towns,
privé
the private
et
sector
les organismes à but non
and
lucratif,
not-for-profits
d'un bout à l'autre
right
de
across
notre
this
grand
great country.
pays. C'est ce que fait notre
That's
gouvernement.
what our government
Et
is
nous
doing,
abordons cette tâche
and we are
avec
approaching this
la
task
détermination,
with the purpose,
l'énergie
drive,
et
and
l'intensité
intensity it
qu'elle
deserves.
mérite. Nous ne cesserons de travailler
We
au
will keep
cours des
working
jours,
day after
des
day,
semaines,
week
des
after
mois
week,
et des années à
month
venir
after month and
pour
year after year,
construire les
to
logements
build the homes
que
that
les
Canadians
Canadiennes
need
et les Canadiens méritent et dont ils ont besoin.
and expect and deserve.
La promesse du Canada repose
At the heart of the
sur la
promise of Canada
conviction
is the
que
conviction
chaque
that
jour doit représenter une nouvelle
every day
opportunité
should represent a
pour
new
tous les
opportunity
Canadiens
for all
et les
Canadians.
Canadiens. peu importe qui ils sont,
No matter who you are,
peu importe leur
no matter
apparence,
what you look like,
qui ils aiment
or who
et
you
qui
love.
ils sont nés.
or where you were born.
Elle repose également sur la conviction
Also,
que
if you
si
work
vous
hard,
travaillez fort, vous pourrez
you can
profiter
share
des
and the
remarquables
remarkable
opportunités
possibilities
que vous offre notre
of our
magnifique
wonderful
pays.
country.
Cela comprend un bon emploi
This
bien payé
includes a
et
good
un
career that
logement
pays you
qui
well
est abordable
and a
pour
home
vous.
you can afford.
Building a Canada that delivers on the promise of the greatest country in the world. That work will be our government's work for these next 2 years and beyond. Canada is not and never has been broken. We are the imperfect and remarkable creation of generations of Canadians who did their part to build a better country in good times and in tough times, calloused hand by calloused hand. Generations of Canadians who fought fear and cynicism with hope and hard work. Generations of Canadians who fought day after day to keep Canada moving forward. And generations of Canadians who believed, just as I do today, that in our magnificent country, better is always possible.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable chef de l'opposition.
With this $20 billion of costly new spending, this update can be summed up very simply. Prices up, rent up, debt up, taxes up, time's up. Common sense conservatives will vote non-confidence on this disgusting scheme. Après 8 ans de ce premier ministre, il n'en vaut pas le coup. Et aujourd'hui, il ajoute un autre 20 milliards de dollars d'inflation, ce qui va mettre la pression sur les taux d'intérêt. En plus, il propose aujourd'hui d'augmenter les taxes et les impôts sur le dos des gens de la classe moyenne. Donc, c'est la raison pour laquelle les conservateurs, guidés par le gros bon sens, voteront contre et voteront non confiance dans son gouvernement. Monsieur le Président. You know, a year ago, this finance minister told the House she'd have the budget balanced by the year 2028. In that time, she has announced $100 billion of additional debt above and beyond having doubled that debt in the first place. This debt is already being paid by Canadians with the worst inflation in 40 years, with interest rates that risk a mortgage meltdown on the $900 billion of mortgages that will renew over the next 3 years. That's 2/3 of mortgages, with the IMF saying that of all 40 OECD countries, Canada is the most at risk of a mortgage crisis. And now, her solution, another $20 billion of inflationary spending. This after the Governor of the Bank of Canada has said that deficits are adding 2 full percentage points to mortgage rates on the backs of Canadians. And finally, today they go ahead with a plan to quadruple the carbon tax.
Point of order. for the member from Elmwood Transcona, can just give me a minute if I could just consult with the table for an instant. The honourable member from Elmwood Transcona on a point of order.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I may have been under a mistaken impression. I thought we were in the question and comment period, but perhaps we're into speeches. I just wonder if you could provide some guidance to the Leader of the Conservative Party. Thank you.
I thank the honourable. I do thank the honourable member from Elmwood Transcona. We are in a period of question and comments. There are 10 minutes for questions and comments. I am hoping that the honourable leader of the opposition will come to his question so that we'll have an equal amount of time for the Minister of Finance to respond, and as well as I know that there are other finance critics from each of the parties who would also like to ask questions and comments. The honourable leader of the opposition, I hope, can come soon to his question.
We can always count on the NDP to betray their constituents and come to the rescue of the tax and spending. And so my question, not just on behalf of the common sense Conservatives, but on behalf of the countless people who are losing their homes, who are lined up at food banks, who are living through the worst economy since the Great Depression, is exactly how much will it cost the average family when this government goes ahead with its plan to quadruple the carbon tax? How much?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let's start by setting the record straight. Canada has the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7, and we've had the fastest rate of fiscal consolidation. And you don't need to ask me, Mr. Speaker, about our fiscally responsible track record. Talk to the ratings agencies, because they have reaffirmed our AAA rating. But, Mr. Speaker, the question that we all need to be asking the Conservatives is, why are they so passionately opposed to the investments that Canadians need? Why are they opposed to early learning and childcare, which is working, which is making life more affordable for Canadians and is expanding our labour force at a time when we desperately need it? Why are they so opposed to building more homes faster for Canadians? Why have they said it is, quote unquote, disgusting to be investing in building more rental homes? Is it disgusting for us to be cracking down on Airbnb? And why are they so opposed to our essential investments in the industrial transformation that Canada needs?
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
Parmi les mesures qui étaient demandées par le Bloc québécois et que le Bloc voulait voir dans cet énoncé économique, il y avait un élément commun, c'était le mot « urgence ». On demandait plus d'argent pour les aînés qui souffrent en ce moment du hausse de la coût de la vie. On demandait un report d'1 an pour le compte d'urgence. Malheureusement, tout ce qu'on a eu pour les PME, pour les 200 000 PME qui crient famine, qui demandent un report d'1 an. On n'avait rien, on avait une page sur les 150 pages. Puis on demandait non seulement de l'argent pour les entreprises et pour les aînés, mais aussi pour les personnes qui sont en cas d'itinérance. On demandait un fonds d'urgence pour les personnes qui s'apprêtent à passer l'hiver maintenant dans la rue. Donc, Monsieur le Président, j'aurais une question pour la ministre des Finances. Quelle est sa définition du mot urgence? Parce que clairement, c'est pas la même que la nôtre.
L'honorable ministre des Finances et vice-première ministre du Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, je dirais ce que je trouve urgent. Je trouve urgent la construction de logements au Québec et partout au Canada. Et c'est pourquoi, dans cet énoncé économique de l'OTAN, on investit 16 milliards de dollars dans la construction du logement. C'est urgent et c'est pourquoi on le fait maintenant. On trouve aussi urgent, Monsieur le Président, un plan économique pour les emplois aujourd'hui et demain. Et c'est pourquoi on investit dans la transition verte. On a fait la plus grande investissement
the
dans
biggest
toute l'histoire
investment
du Québec.
in
Et je
Quebec's
sais
history.
maintenant le Premier ministre
that
Legault,
now
qui
Premier
était
Legault
très fier d'être
is
un
very
partenaire
proud to be a
avec
partner
nous. On
with us.
investit pour les besoins d'aujourd'hui
investing for
et
the
les
needs of
emplois
today
d'aujourd'hui
and the
et
jobs
demain.
of today and tomorrow.
The honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the minister mentioned in her remarks that we're facing a housing crisis, certainly a significant housing shortage. She talked about how Canada has the lowest debt in the G7. She talked about how it has the lowest deficit in the G7. The government of the Bank of Canada said that spending on housing wouldn't be inflationary. Now, she announced some measures today for social housing, but they don't start until 2025, 2026.
Trigger the concern.
The honourable member rising on a point of order.
My point of order, Mr. Speaker, is that there isn't a question in this long, rambling, pointless speech.
Order. I'd like to remind all members that this is a question and comments. The honourable member from Elmwood-Transcona still has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am tempted to start from the top, but I won't, because I do want to get to the point, which is that for a government that's saying they're in a good fiscal position, and with a Bank of Canada that says spending on housing is not inflationary, the question is, why are the new investments for social housing put off to 2025?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister for Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the member for Elmwood-Transcona for his commitment to Canadians, for his hard work on housing. Mr. Speaker, we absolutely understand the urgency of investing in housing. We need to invest in housing today, and we need to have a plan to continue investing in housing going forward. I am very pleased that our investments in housing right now include supporting the development of co-op housing, of lifting the GST from new co-op developments, along with providing new funding to get them built. As someone who has lived in a co-op, I can tell you, this is one of the best forms of affordable housing that creates great community at the same time.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre on a brief question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that the finance minister recognizes we are in a climate crisis. At the same time, she needs to know that oil and gas companies are gouging Canadians at the pumps. 47 cents of every dollar of inflation from corporate profits. Why would they not apply the Canada Recovery Dividend, which they already did, to banks and life insurance, to big oil in the fall economic statement?
And a brief answer from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
We absolutely understand the urgency of climate action. That is why I'm delighted that today we are publishing a timeline for our investment tax credits that are so essential to Canada's green transition and to our economic plan that is creating jobs today and jobs tomorrow.
Brief question from the member from Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in the past number of budgets, we have seen the federal government commit significant funding to support the people of Ukraine in their fight against Russia's genocidal invasion. And so my question to the Minister of Finance is, we just saw the Conservative Party MPs vote against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, basically voting against support for Ukraine. Could the Minister clarify what is this government's position on support for Ukraine?
Excellent question. And a very brief answer from the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, The leader of the opposition described our measures to build new homes for Canadians as disgusting. I'll tell you what I will describe as disgusting. The failure by the official opposition to support the country which is fighting the world's fight right now for democracy, for rules. I am
Reprise du débat, l'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Monsieur le Président, après 8 ans de ce premier ministre, l'inflation a atteint son niveau le plus élevé depuis 40 ans. Le travail ne paye plus. Le coût de logement a doublé. La criminalité, le chaos, les drogues et le désordre sont communs dans nos rues. Et le premier ministre essaie de diviser les Canadiens afin de distraire de tous ces échecs. Il faut d'abord reconnaître le pays que le premier ministre a trouvé quand il est arrivé au pouvoir. Commençons avec les taux d'intérêt et le taux d'inflation. Ces taux-là étaient bas. Les taxes baissaient plus rapidement qu'à n'importe quel moment dans l'histoire de notre pays. Le budget était équilibré. La criminalité avait baissé de 25 à tel point que les habitants des petites villes laissaient souvent leurs portes déroulées. Nos frontières étaient sûres. Le logement coûtait la moitié de ce que ça coûte aujourd'hui. Les salaires nets avaient augmenté de 10 %. Ça, c'est après l'inflation et après les impôts. Le New York Times a dit que la classe moyenne canadienne était plus riche que la classe moyenne. Le New York Times disait que la classe moyenne canadienne était plus riche que la classe moyenne américaine. Pour la première fois, tout cela en dépit d'une crise financière sans précédent aux États-Unis et de guerres en Syrie, en Irak et oui, en Ukraine. Il est amusant de constater qu'à l'époque de Stephen Harper, ces guerres-là n'ont pas causé de l'inflation au Canada. Mais lorsque ce premier ministre actuel a pris le pouvoir, les prix augmentent de façon exorbitante. 8 ans plus tard, regarde où on en est. L'inflation, après avoir déjà atteint des sommets de 40 ans, est de nouveau trop élevée. L'économie se contracte. C'est vrai. L'économie actuellement, c'est en train de se contracter, même si la population est en hausse. Le PIB par personne est aujourd'hui inférieur comparativement à il y a 6 ans. C'est la première fois dans notre histoire qu'on a vu l'économie, le PIB par capita se réduise dans la grandeur pour une période de 6 ans. La croissance du Canada devrait être la dernière parmi les pays de l'OCDE, non seulement pour les 6 prochaines années, mais pour les 3 prochaines décennies. Ça, c'est selon l'OCDE. Ce n'est pas moi qui dis ça, Monsieur le Président. Le coût du logement a plus de doublé après 8 ans de ce gouvernement. Après qu'il a promis de le réduire, il faut désormais 25 ans pour économiser assez d'argent pour un premier versement à Toronto. Avant ce premier ministre, ça prenait 25 ans pour rembourser toute une hypothèque. Certaines familles doivent prolonger la durée de leur prêt hypothécaire jusqu'à 40 ans, ce qui signifie qu'il faut maintenant avoir peut-être 120 ans de vie pour pouvoir être non endetté comme famille. En réalité, ça va être des enfants et des petits-enfants qui vont littéralement devoir rembourser les hypothèques de leurs parents et leurs grands-parents. On n'a jamais vu ça. Sûrement au Canada. J'imagine qu'il n'y a aucun endroit au monde où c'était le cas. Les maisons canadiennes coûtaient maintenant coûtent plus de 50% plus cher au Canada qu'aux États-Unis. Ça, c'est la réalité après 8 ans de ce premier ministre qui avait promis de rendre la vie plus abordable. Et quelles sont ses solutions aujourd'hui? Premièrement, il veut hausser les taxes sur l'essence, ce qui augmente le coût de tout. Tout ce qui est transporté sera plus cher avec le taxe carbone que le gouvernement vient de confirmer, qui va augmenter le prix de l'essence de 17 sous et 20 sous si on ajoute le taxe de vente sur ça. Une taxe que le Bloc veut radicalement augmenter sur le dos des Québécois. En plus, on entend des promesses avec des milliards de dollars pour le logement encore, les mêmes promesses qu'on a vues depuis 8 ans. 8 ans, il a promis des dépenses, mais ça sert simplement à augmenter la bureaucratie et non pas le logement. Et finalement, un autre 20 milliards de dollars de nouveaux dépenses qui ajoutera à l'inflation et les augmentations de taux d'intérêt. Banque Scotia a déjà dit que 2 des taux d'intérêt payés maintenant sont la conséquence directe des déficits. Les déficits que le gouvernement propose d'augmenter. Et parlons de la dette. L'année prochaine, pour la première fois, nous allons dépenser plus sur l'intérêt pour notre dette que sur la santé. Plus de 50 000 milliards de dollars sera dépensé sur l'intérêt plus que nous allons envoyer aux provinces pour nos infirmières et nos médecins. Donc, des bancaires et des investisseurs de Manhattan recevront l'argent et nos enseignants, nos infirmières, nos médecins ne recevront pas. Ça n'a pas de bon sens, Monsieur le Président. Heureusement, nous avons un plan de gros bon sens. Un plan qui va plafonner les dépenses et éliminer le gaspillage afin de réduire l'inflation et les taux d'intérêt. On va éliminer les taxes pour réduire le coût de la vie pour chaque Canadien. On va réduire les impôts pour que le travail redevienne à nouveau payant. Nous allons rebâtir le rêve canadien où le travail permet n'importe qui, n'importe où, de gagner une bonne vie, d'avoir une maison et de vivre paisiblement dans leur communauté. Donc, le choix dans les prochaines élections sera entre une coalition coûteuse qui va enlever votre argent, augmenter vos taxes, augmenter les taxes, les impôts et permettre davantage de la criminalité ou les conservateurs guidés par le gros bon sens, qui vous permettrait de gagner un plus grand chèque de paie qui achète de nourriture, de l'essence et des maisons dans des communautés sécuritaires. C'est ça le choix et nous allons être le seul choix du gros bon sens pour les Québécois et tous les Canadiens, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, as we stand here today and witness the misery that is visible across this country, it's hard to forget how good things were only 8 years ago when this Prime Minister took office. Let me review the hard facts. Never before has a Prime Minister inherited a richer legacy. Inflation and interest rates were rock bottom. Taxes were falling faster than at any time in Canadian history. The budget was balanced. It took 25 years to pay off a mortgage, not just to get a mortgage. Crime had fallen by 25%, so low that many small-town folks actually left their doors unlocked. Remember those good days when you could leave your door unlocked? No one would do that today. Our borders were secure. Housing costs half what it does today. Take-home pay had gone up 10% after tax and inflation. The New York Times had calculated that Canada's middle class was, for the first time ever, richer than America's middle class. All this despite a once-in-a-lifetime financial crisis in the U.S. and wars in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and yes, Ukraine. Funny how those wars didn't cause inflation when Prime Minister Harper was leading our economy. But yes, it's true that when this Prime Minister took office, Canada was rich, affordable, and safe. 8 years ago, yes, it was. Rich, affordable, and safe. And it's true. The very wealthy had not done particularly well. In fact, their share of the economy had shrunk during the Harper years. Now, the wealth concentrates among the very, very rich. And that is because inflationary policies always help the richest people. When government concentrates wealth in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats, they give it to the most politically influential people, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And now we're seeing the biggest gap ever between rich and poor. And a middle class, he promised to help the middle class. He has demolished the middle class, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. Inflation, after hitting 40-year highs, is back on the move. The economy is now shrinking. And if you add in per capita terms, it is plummeting, Mr. Speaker. In fact, GDP per person is actually smaller than it was 6 years ago. This has never happened, Mr. Speaker. Canada's growth is now projected to be the worst in the OECD between now and 2030, and the worst for the next 4 decades, according to the OECD. That's out of 40 countries. It now takes 25 years to save up for a down payment in Toronto. You used to pay off a mortgage in that time. Since this Prime Minister has taken office, families have stretched out the terms of their mortgages to 90 years. Today, the minister bragged that she's going to create this charter, which will, people are supposed to be grateful about this, will allow them to stretch out their mortgages longer so that you can now have a 100-year mortgage. Wow, and now we're supposed to thank them. Wow, what wonderful news. I imagine she'll send it out in the mail so people can open their mailbox and find out that their great-great-grandchildren will still be paying off the mortgage on their home. Canadian homes now cost 50% more than in the United States of America. In fact, you can now buy a 20-bedroom castle in Scotland for a lower price than a 2-bedroom in Kitchener. Vancouver is now the third most unaffordable housing market in the world when you compare median income to median house prices, worse than New York City, than Los Angeles, Chicago, London, England, even Singapore, a tiny island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canada, has more affordable housing. And Toronto is rated by UBS to be the worst housing bubble in the world. If we had even imagined to say such a thing out loud 8 years ago, people would have laughed. But today, it is the reality, and they're not laughing. They're actually crying. In fact, the government promises all of a sudden, after 8 years, we should believe in their multi-billion-dollar promises to build homes. They built fewer homes last year than were built in 1972, 50 years ago. And that was at a time when our population was half of what it is today. So we're building fewer homes now that we have 40 million people than we built when we had 22 million people, Mr. Speaker. And no wonder we have this new phenomenon of middle-class, working, homeless people. We've never seen this before, but now we have nurses, electricians, carpenters living in parking lots, something they couldn't even imagine in Halifax, in your province, Speaker. The province, ironically, of the housing minister. There are 30 homeless encampments in one city. This would have been unimaginable. And now they expect us to believe that this time they mean it, that their billions of dollars of new spending are going to change what the billions of dollars they've spent over the last decade have caused. And that is the worst housing crisis in Canadian history, perhaps the worst in the world today. This Prime Minister has doubled our national debt, adding more debt than all of the previous 22 Prime Ministers combined. He continually tells us that there are no consequences for that debt. Well, the consequences are now becoming clear. Next year, the government will spend more on debt interest than it does on health care. So instead of the money going to doctors and nurses, it will go to bankers and bondholders in Manhattan and in London, England. Another transfer of wealth from the working class to everybody else, to the wealthiest people, from the working class to the smirking class, Mr. Speaker. We see the social breakdown that this has brought in our communities, with crime raging out of control. Shootings are up 101% across Canada over the last 8 years. Drug overdoses, 30,000 of them, Mr. Speaker. Social breakdown is the obvious consequence of the economic breakdown that the Prime Minister has caused. And on what has he spent all of this money? $54 million for the ArriveCan app that we didn't need, didn't work, and could have been done in a weekend by a couple of IT workers. We know that because they did. A couple of IT workers, as a lark, bought a few boxes of pizza and a case of beer and redesigned the entire ArriveCan app in a weekend. And it didn't cost them $54 million. Maybe we should send that app to the Prime Minister and call it the ResignCan app, Mr. Speaker. And then they blew $1 billion on a so-called green fund. The top bureaucrats say that who are involved in it say that it's a money-for-nothing scheme with gross incompetence that reminds them of the sponsorship scandal. The chair of the fund gave $200,000 of the money to her own company. Now, we find out that the $15 billion they're giving to a single battery plant is going to pay for 1,600 foreign workers. 1,600 foreign workers, Mr. Speaker. And they don't even have a place to live. There's a housing shortage in Windsor. Now, the Prime Minister's solution is to spend precious tax dollars on paychecks for people on the other side of the world to come here temporarily, collect the money, and take it back to South Korea. We all love South Korea, great country. But there's no reason why Canadian taxpayers should be subsidizing their paychecks. Canadian tax dollars should exclusively go to Canadian paychecks. That's common sense. And the Prime Minister, of course, wastes money through missed opportunities. We could develop our resources. For example, we could be breaking dependence on the world's dictators. And let's talk about this for a moment. Today, his party shamefully voted to impose a carbon tax on the people of Ukraine. They have voted to amend the existing Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, which Conservatives negotiated and which has been a success, to require that both countries have and promote carbon taxes, Mr. Speaker. Exactly the opposite of what the people of Ukraine need. They don't need a carbon tax when they're trying to fight and defeat a war. They need the ability to rebuild their economy, which takes energy. And that's why Conservatives will oppose any imposition of a carbon tax there or here or anywhere around the world. And you know what else they did? They voted against an amendment that would allow Canadians to build the arms that would allow Ukraine to win that war. We proposed an amendment to this update of the agreement that would have allowed Ukrainians to benefit from our incredible Canadian workers who produce munitions and equipment, and they voted no. So let's get this straight. They believe that the best way to counter Putin is with a carbon tax. We believe the best way to do it is by breaking European dependence on his energy sector and by providing and selling great Canadian arms to win the war. That's common sense. Canadians understand that the way that you help a country rebuild is by selling technology for energy. We proposed as well that we would provide both civilian nuclear technology and sell our civilian-grade uranium from Saskatchewan to power nuclear plants that would give emissions-free electricity to Ukrainians as they have to replace bombed-out electricity plants. The Prime Minister did not include that in his deal because he doesn't want affordable energy. He doesn't want the jobs to come back to our resource sector. All he wanted was to try and save his carbon tax That's just how desperate he is. And in fact, how sick he is on this matter, Mr. Speaker. We all know that he was desperate to save his carbon tax. But for him to use the people of Ukraine as a pawn in his scheme to save the carbon tax is a level of cynicism that we didn't even expect from that Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. When I'm Prime Minister, we will have a free trade agreement with Ukraine, and that agreement will not include a carbon tax. It will include the ability of us to provide clean Canadian nuclear and natural gas to have a strong energy superpower status for Canada and a superior Absolutely. And the hypocritical members over there who pretend they support Ukraine, but then they supported the Prime Minister signing off on a turbine to go from Montreal to Putin so that he could power his natural gas pipeline and pump that gas into Europe to fund his war. That's the Prime Minister's priority, to give Putin more money selling natural gas. Our priority, our common sense plan, turns dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people in this country. I don't think this debate is going how they expected it to go. Their heads are all looking down, and rightfully so, Mr. Speaker. It will be a good moment for them to atone for the cynical approach they've taken on this and everything else, and frankly, the misery that they have unleashed in this country. This is the worst time in Canada's history for the Canadian people, particularly for the middle class. But the good news is we have a common sense plan that will axe the tax to bring home lower prices, cap spending and cut waste to bring down inflation and interest rates, remove bureaucracy to build more homes so that once again people can afford to rent and pay their mortgages. This will be a country that works for the people who do the work, the common people, the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it on.
Eric.